How you doing, guys? What are you doing? And welcome to a brand new tutorial from iPrumus. So today we're gonna have a brand new tutorial about making a really awesome and elegant login / register form on React. So as clearly seen here, this is the demo. This is the final thing we're gonna be creating on today's video tutorial. Step by step, we're gonna cover up all the style files, all the React components, and everything that is gonna be involved into making this login components. So login components in here has a couple of like a simple animation pretty much. So you can toggle between this animation. You can click and register, and the register gonna get in here. As clear as in here, it gets a login and so on and so forth. Just like a simple animation, you can completely discard this animation and you can pretty much add a button in here to toggle between the register and the login. But otherwise, it's actually pretty basic animation. You might want to find another different animation. The image in there we used though is actually an open source license image, which means you can use it in your project either for commercial or for free or open source use. It doesn't really matter that much, and you can use it perfectly. So I'm just gonna jump and start creating these login components. So here we got a Create React App based project, the Create React App CLI or command line interface to set up and configure these projects in here. So it's clear in here. I haven't modified any of this whatsoever. The only thing I just did is installed the Node SaaS support. So if you can just jump into the back.json, I'm gonna notice that I've got the Node SaaS in here. So you might want to add like the dependency, or you can just go and work with it. So you can do like Node SaaS and make sure to run npm install again, and that should pretty much work for you. So you can do Node SaaS, and I don't know, you can get a major version of it, so, or the most basic version or easier way to do that. So just go ahead and do npm install Node SaaS. So we pretty much would recommend is that. So you can do npm install and Node SaaS, and make sure to save it as development dependency, because we're going to use this to compile or use the SaaS preprocessor, CSS preprocessor in our React project, and it's going to be included directly into it without worrying about this. So this is basically all you need to do, and also make sure to run the watch and start your application to get it into the localhost 3000 port in order to start the development of this. So that's basically all we need to do for that, and let's just go ahead and just jump right into it and start working with this. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the SRC. I'm going to create a folder. We're going to name it components, and inside of the components folder I'm going to have like a login component folder. So this one is going to hold all the login / register and its style files that we basically all need for this case. So I'm going to do in here, like I'm going to do index.gsx, and make sure to use the GSX extension, because we basically need to tell our Visual Studio Code that we are working with GSX, otherwise it won't recognize this whatsoever. The second thing in here we're going to need is actually putting the login components, and the other thing we are going to be putting also, it's not actually a folder, it's a file, and I'm going to be putting the register.gsx. Simple enough. So this is all we need to do in here, and lastly we need just to add the style.scss, which is just for the style going to be inserted into our login components and the actual login popovers, however. So this is basically all we need to do for this case. In this case, what we're going to probably do is actually just go ahead and do import React. So we're going to work on the login components, and I'm going to do import React. So from React, I'm going to get React as always, and I'm going to just get React again, and I'm going to here import the actual login image. So the login image in here, as you've seen before, I've got it from a website called like free resources for creative or SVG resources, and it's held up by a freelancer, a girl. It's pretty great, it's pretty awesome. I will put you the link in the description below, so you might want to just go and check it out and grab some free SVG from there. Here we need to go and do export class login, and I'm going to be extending from react.components. So as always, just like the bare minimum and the basic stuff, I'm going to be using the constructor. I'm going to be putting props, and I'm going to just put the props inside of the super in order to register it on the current class context. Here for the render function, or the render method basically, just going to be using the render method, and I'm going to start rendering things up using this. I'm going to return, and I'm going to basically, so I'm going to be the base container for that, and I'm going to also put another div which is going to be the header. The header is going to hold either register, so this is what we're going to be using it for this case. Alright, so this is actually going to mean the main content. we need to hold up the image, so the image that we have just imported from this case, or pretty much from this SVG file that I've just included. I'm going to be including in this case pretty simple the SVG file in a second. So now we've got the login.svg file, which pretty much gonna hold that image in this case. So pretty basic. I'm gonna use or put a container for the image, and this container is gonna hold the actual image, HTML image elements in this case. So I'm just gonna be putting in here like image, and the src we are just gonna be using the login image I've just imported from the top there. We don't need an alt attributes whatsoever, and that's basically all we need for the image. The second thing we need is actually a form. So with the form, it's actually going to represent the actual form for our like login inputs and like username input, password input, and so on and so forth. So we're going to like create a universal form or a standard one, so we can both use them on the login and on the register components. We can reuse the actual components. So in this case, we're going to be adding like a div form group. So actually it's going to be a form group, and for the form group we're going to be adding a label. So the label in this case is going to be like a username, so it's going to be like holding username up here. And the second thing in here, we're going to need an input. The input is going to be type text. We don't need any class name whatsoever, just need a name, so to match up the label and to be linked together. And we basically need a placeholder for a username. So that's basically all we need to do for that case. So just need like a simple form group. Now we're just going to copy paste this, and we're going to add here the password. Since we're logged in, we just need the username and password, so we can match them up together. And there we go. So just make sure to finally change the type of that to the password, and you're basically ready to go. So here is actually the form, and outside the actual contents we need to add a footer, and instead of footer is going to have the actual button. So the button is going to represent the submit button and everything. This is basically what we're going to be adding in this case. So it's going to be the footer, and we're going to have inside of it a button with a class of like btn, so we can add a class in this. Type is going to be a button, just a simple button, not a submit form button or anything. As I've said, a simple button. And here we might just like say login. Okay, pretty simple, pretty straight to the point. And make sure to export this. Just export the actual class. Do not export as default, because we're going to be importing inside of the index.jsx, and we're going to just manipulate it however we want. Now we can go ahead and copy this, and we can just jump into the register components and put everything there because it has the same structure. We just need some simple changes here. We need just to change this name of the class to register. We change this to register. We've got a username, so instead of password, we've got going to add another field. So I'm just going to be using this, copy pasting it, and I'm going to add the email field. So remember that we got email again. For registering a new user, we need to take his email. So, and there you go. So type is actually like email and everything, and we might just put the type in here. It doesn't really matter that much. And make sure to change the button text to register. So that's basically all you need to do. Now you can jump into the index.jsx, and we are going to re-export everything. So what do you mean by re-export? Actually just import it and re-export it. So it's going to work as a redirector. So this file, whenever we just import it from the app.jsx, it's just going to go ahead and import the login and re-export it for the actual file or that we are importing from. In this case, it's going to be the app.jsx, of course. So we're going to have login, and we are going to export it from the .login file. So it's actually using or supported in ESX. Since now we are ES8, you don't really have to care about that much because it's mostly supported using Babel or either using TypeScript or the TypeScript reloader. So everything's going to be supported pretty much fine. And that's basically all we need to do, caring about putting the login components and everything else inside of that. Now the most important place to work with, and you can just go ahead and jump into this, we might want to get rid of the header, and we can just go ahead and import the actual login. So I'm going to do like login, and we are going to be importing it from components /login, and it should actually get us the actual login class. It's clearly seen here, so it should pretty much work fine. You might want to go ahead and reference the index if you really needed that. but it's not really that much of important to actually put everything in there. So we can get the div and we can put login. So as curious in here, for some reason it tells us the login is basically not re-exported from the login file, the login to be couple case. So that's actually a common issue, and there we go. So just make sure to put the couple case in here, and everything's pretty much working fine now. So we can just go and jump to the index.jsx. We still haven't got the right style for it. Now let's go and jump into the style.css or SCSS for the Sass, and we can just go and start up working on the actual style for the login component itself, not the whole application, because we are going to still filling up the app.css though, so just going to be having the actual file or the style for the current login / register container. So I'm going to start off with the base container, and the way I love using Sass basically so you can like put nested child inside of its parents without using different type of parameters like all CSS. So kind of a little bit ugly, but using Sass, it makes it super easy, and it makes it actually sweet to work with this, and it has a lot of syntax and helper functions. So we can just go and use this right off the box. I'm going to put it width, and the width is going to be 100% at first. So just the base container is going to take the full width and the full height of the first container. We're going to create like a child container for it on the application, so we really have to care about this. We're going to have display. I always use flexbox for this, and I'm going to change the flex direction to column because we need just to put them underneath each other's. We're going to have align items, or pretty much actually align items to center, to actually horizontally center them, not vertically though, just horizontally. We're going to be centering the actual login box or the base container, which means the base container children's. Here we're going to be referencing the actual header. So header, we're going to have a font size of 24 pixels or something. Okay, and the font family here, I'm going to be using Open Sans. So you can just go and use this or add it from Google, which is a free font. So you can clearly use like the Google CDN to grab this. I already did grab it, so I'm just gonna go ahead and copy paste this Google font to really easily work with it. So we've got a custom fonts, and you can just go into app.css on the top right here. You can put the custom fonts. It's clear in here, just import it, and the Google APIs, I'm just gonna be using it. You can Google this out, or you can grab the source code, the full source code from GitHub of this application, and you can pretty much guess the building blocks of it. So you can, I don't know, build your login box or whatsoever. So here we are using the font family, which is Open Sans. You are free pretty much to use whatever fonts pleases you and works perfectly with your UI. And here I'm going to be putting the contents. So the content is going to have a display of flags. The flags direction is going to be column, and basically we're going to have like a nested child, which is the image. So the image, for example, we're just going to give it about 21 inches or em, and the actual image elements of the holder of the image, so it's going to take the full width and the full height. So it pretty much depends on the actual parents when we say full width and the full height. So like the parents of that image, which is this particular container, is going to be able to control this. So whenever the width is 21 em, this one is going to take the same width as this. So that's basically. Now for the form, we're just going to put a form, and the form is going to pretty much represent working with our like the main custom for style. So, or the form that we have inputs and the label inside of it, and the form group. Here we're gonna have like a margin top to 2 em, and for it we're gonna have like a display. So for this display I'm gonna be putting a flex, so as always, and I'm gonna have like a flex direction to be column. So just for putting things underneath each other's, of course, since a form, so each form group is going to just come underneath each other's as a column. So here we're going to be putting the align items, and for the align items, I'm just going to put in center. So as simple as that, as basic as this is pretty much how it's going to be looking like. And for that, so we can go and do is actually inside of the index.jsx, and we might here want to import the actual style, so we can do actually import. Alright, and So we just need to be looking at style.scss, which is this one right over there. And there we go. Now we got our style applied, but we still have a couple of things to be covered up on the style actually. So after the form actually has a nested child, which is the form group. So inside of the form group, we're gonna have again a display flex. So I like working with display or flex boxes a lot because it just like gives you a lot of flexibility, as well as it is pretty easy to use and easy to manipulate children's. So you can easily like center them or style them or whatever you pretty much want to on your designs. Here we want to put like line items, and we're gonna just putting them on the flex start, which means they're gonna start from the left hand corner. And this is pretty great when it comes to text and inputs and labels. So we're just gonna put flex start, and there you go. So for the width, we might just put like fit content, so it fits the available content whatsoever. And for the label, what we want to use actually just a font size of 20 pixels. So 20 pixels seems like quite interesting, and what we're getting in this case, just 20 pixels for an input. Now the actual input, or for the label basically, for the actual input, we're going to have a couple of things. So we're going to first have a margin top. So each input is going to have like a margin from the actual label, about 6 pixels. For the minimum width that an input could take, but it can actually increase depending on the actual resolution of the device or of the screen. But the minimum bare width is just going to be just 18 AM. To make it look pretty great and fits the actual width of the container. Here we're gonna have height of 73 pixels or something. The padding actually is gonna take 0 pixels, the top and the bottom, and 10 pixels on the left and right. And basically for the font size, what we're gonna be adding is just about 16 pixels for just like the placeholder font size plus the text we put inside of the actual input font size. For the font family is also going to take both of them, and I'm going to be using Open Sans, as I've said again, and if it doesn't find any, we're just going to fall back into the sans serif. For the background color, I'm going to use a specific background color, like a little bit of white gray or something like this, to make it look pretty great. So I'm going to use F3, and I'm just going to use F3 in here. So just a little bit of gray in white. We're going to completely remove the border. I'm going to just put border radius about, well, 4 pixels, and the margin bottom. It's going to be just about 31 pixels, okay? Pretty great. For the transition, so for the transition in this case, we're going to have is actually 250 milliseconds, and we're going to use the ease in, ease out timing function. So I'm just going to use ease in, ease out. And for, let's say we have like some hover or anything, or pretty much we're not going to be including the hover, we're going to be using focus instead. So once we focus on that, like the cursor actually is focused on this particular input, we're going to just completely remove the outline. So make sure to not use the outline whatsoever. And the box shadow, I'm just going to use like a specific box shadow centered on the actual input. So 0 pixel on the x-axis and the y-axis. We're going to have 12 pixels of blur and about 0.8 of spread. Okay, so for the spread, I'm just going to use a quick one, and not really that complicated. I'm going to use some kind of like a blue hover effect, or pretty much blue color, blue shady color, coming up from like a decent opacity. So just 08, 81, CE, and 96. There you go. So it should look pretty decent right now. There you go. Look what it looks like. Pretty great for the input, and for the actual label looks pretty great as well. The content of this one is actually pretty centered. The button though doesn't look that much of professional. The image pretty great, and it doesn't have that much of issues or whatsoever. So that's basically all we need to do for that. Just one thing, we can just go and put some like for the footer, we can put some margin top. So in this case, for the footer, what we can do is just basically put the footer, and for the footer we can just gonna do it margin dash top about 3M or something. Okay, there you go. So now it should look pretty much fine. without any issues or problems. The footer I'm putting it in the wrong place exactly, so in that it should look pretty great. Okay, it comes afterwards. There you go. Now the footer, the content, and the headers, all of them are both perfectly centered and it works pretty much fine. So this is how you can just gonna put the actual input. You might want to get the full style. Of course, you don't really want to type or retype the whole style, so you can grab the full GitHub repository of this project from the link in the description below, so you can go ahead and quickly check it out and clone it or whatever, and you can manipulate it however you want. So I just wanted to cover up the actual style of the actual inputs and the labels to know how to put a login box or a login form together, but I'm not really quickly just going to figure out the whole style of the app.css, because we're going to have complicated animations and stuff that's going to takes quite some time. So I don't really want to waste that much of time on the styles. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste the full style of this, the full style of the actual application itself, or the app.css, and just going to put it there. So if you're interested in this, you can grab it from the GitHub repository, as I've said again. And yeah, that's basically it. I'm gonna be covering what it needs to be covered, the crucial parts. Here, as clear as in here, I've added the button, so it is pretty great. The button has a color, or the background color, of blue. It has a transition of 250 milliseconds, and a hover. Of course, once you hover, it's just gonna change a little bit of the color, darkens the color. And of course, once you focus, we're not gonna just allow the outline whatsoever, and that's basically it. So it clears in here. This is the button. It has some cool hover effect, just a very minimal thing, and it works pretty fine. So we're going to be covering all of the style in here as we go throughout the components. Now the main components we're going to be working on is actually the app.jsx. So actually is going to be the heart bone of our application, which is going to manage the creates the container for the login box. It's going to trigger or toggle between both the login and the register components, and make sure to choose the right one between both of these. So here, as clear as in here, it has a function, and we don't really need a function in this case. So what I'm gonna probably do is just gonna convert this into a class. I'm gonna create a class. The class is gonna be named up, and it's gonna extend, because we're gonna need to use the hooks functions from the React components, and the props and the states. You still can use pretty much hooks in here. So some of you might come in the comments below and say probably, why aren't you using hooks? Basically for the best thing. So some of people doesn't know hooks or something, so I'm just gonna covering everything, and I'm just covering here the standard React. So you can easily use hooks, and they are even easier than using the state, and makes it super simple. So I really need to cover that, so you can go ahead and work with it by yourself. I'm gonna put the super in here, and I'm gonna put the props again. I'm gonna have a state. So the state in here, I'm gonna have is login active, just to keep track if the current login is pretty much active or not, and that's basically what we need to do. I'm gonna have a render method, which is gonna be the main render method for our code and stuff. So for the render method, what I'm gonna probably do is just gonna return, and for the returning, I'm gonna put a class name of application. So I'm gonna put a class name of login. So it's actually gonna be the main class name for both the login and the register, which is gonna have a box. I'm gonna have another class name, which is the container. So the container in this case is gonna hold up the main container of the login or either register. So I need to go ahead and reference this variable to make sure either we are actually inside of the login component, or we need to activate the register components. So here I'm gonna use the spread box, or the spread syntax from ESX is login active. And we're just going to extract this from the states. There you go. Now we just check if is login active, and if it is actually active, what we can probably do is actually just render up the login. So pretty basic, pretty straight to the point, nothing really complicated in this case. And of course we need just going to put a container reference as we've put inside of the login. So if you can take a look on the actual login, so where is that? So for the login file in here, what we've put inside of the props, we still need to go and just we'll go ahead and put it. So inside of the props, what we're gonna probably do is actually put a container reference. So remember the reference elements in here, or the attribute. What it allows you to do is actually reference the current element and get its reference during the render time or the runtime of React. So we can just gonna feed it to the this.props dot container reference, and for this function we're gonna be feeding it inside of that. I'm gonna copy paste this into the same thing, which is the register. So basically gonna have the same thing, no impacts whatsoever. And I can jump back into the app.jsx. Here what we're gonna have is actually the container reference. So I'm gonna have like container. Alright. So the container reference is gonna be like a function. It takes refs, or pretty much provides us with refs, and we can just put like this.current equals reference, and there you go. So this is basically all we need to cover that. Nothing really complicated. So if login is not active, obviously the register is going to be active. So in this case, we are going to be needing to run, or pretty much put the register in here, and you're just going to import the register real quick from the top of that. There you go. You can just gonna also put or copy paste the actual container reference, because you're gonna have the same thing. We are gonna though reference two things. Like we're gonna first, if the login is being rendered, we are gonna put the reference inside of the current variable inside of the current class context. Otherwise, if the register is being rendered, and of course the login is not going to be rendered, the current is going to hold the actual reference for the register component and vice versa. So this is basically why I'm putting both of them having the same variable name in here, because only one is going to be rendered at a time, either the login or the register component, not both at the same time. So that's basically what I mean by this. Now the other thing what I'd probably do is actually outside the container, so this container is going to only hold either the login or the register, and outside of it I'm going to create another component which is going to call it the right side. So I just called it the right side, I don't know, because it can go to the right and the left both, but you can actually figure out a little bit better name on this. So what I'm gonna probably do in here, I'm gonna create a component, just a simple stateless functional component. I'm gonna call this right side component, and it's gonna take props, and of course it simply just returns a div with the right side class. So the right side is still actually really not that much of importance. You can ignore it, and you can just put the login box in this case, but we still need it very much if you want to apply the animation and toggle between the login and the register components at the same time. We might also here gonna put like a reference. So for the reference, what I'm gonna probably do is just like put props dots container reference, and we can just gonna access this throughout the props. You also might want to put the onClick method or the onClick function in this. So we're just going to put onClick, because we need once we click on that, we need to be able to like take the click event from outside of the component, like from the up component into the right side component. So just put this onClick, and there you go. And inside of this, what we're going to probably do is actually just having an inner container. And inside of the inner container, we're going to have another one, which is a text, and it's going to hold actually the props.current, which means either login or register. So if it is currently login, we're going to have the right side going to display the register text, and once we click it, it goes to the other side with the smooth animation, and it displays login, and the login component takes place instead of the login components right over here. So this is basically how the toggling is going to be working in this case. I'm going to be putting currents in here, and that's basically all we need for that. So outside of the container in this, we're going to probably do just put the right side. And of course, for the right side in here, we need just to provide it with a couple of things. I can provide it with current, and I can provide like a current variable. I will discuss that in a second, so I'm just going to put current variable. And for the current variable, I'm going to have is login active. If it is actually active, we are going to put register. So if the current login active, which means we are actually currently in the login, So we're gonna display the register text, so we can toggle between that, or we can move to the register component. Otherwise, we're just gonna simply show the login. So simple enough. We can also have another variable which is current active, which is currently active, not the thing that we are gonna be transitioned to. So we're gonna have like is login active. It is active. I'm gonna just put login. Otherwise, we're gonna put register. Simple enough. Alright, so I can go and jump in here, and I don't know, you can supply current active in here if you really need it. So you can just put container reference, and the reference thing in here we can do is actually right side and equals the actual reference. On the other side, we also need the onClick function, or the onClick method, to be passed the reference to. And for this one, we're going to be creating another method inside of the current application class. I'm going to be naming it change state. So the change state in here is going to take care of changing the state over and over again. So we're going to be bind, and I'm going to be binding to the current context. Make sure to bind the current context, otherwise it won't work perfectly, because this will be undefined inside of the method once you take the reference of the method outside of the class scope. And that would be really disaster, so make sure to do that right away, otherwise it won't work perfectly. Now I'm just going to put the change state in here, and for the change state we're going to have is actually is login active. So just we can grab this from the state, and we can make sure if it is active or not. If it is actually active, we're going to transition the right side, like take it from the right side to the left side, or vice versa. So if the current active, which means if we are currently inside of like the login component is being rendered, which means we are going to have this right side rendered on the right in here. So you can clearly say, we can get rid of that and save to see what I mean by this. So clearly see in here. You clearly see here what we've got. We got just this empty thing in here. So it's actually from the right. What we need is actually once we click it, it takes this and it goes to the left, and it displays in here, it displays the register component, and it says inside of this container it says login. And once we click it again, it goes to the right side, it says register, and we get the login component back again. So this is basically what we need to do in this case. So just using if statement, we check if it is currently active. If it is actually active, we are going to trigger up a class. So I'm going to do this right side. We're going to just use the right side reference components, and I'm going to ask the class list. For the class list, I'm going to first remove the right class. I'm going to show you these classes, what they do in a second. We're also going to make sure to do, or like inside of the class list, I'm going to add a class which basically going to be the left class. Otherwise, we have else. So we can just going to grab this real quick, and we can toggle between both of these. So here, instead of right, we're going to have left, and here we're going to have right, because we're going to remove the left class since we have added in here if it has been already added. And also we also need to make sure to add the right class. So we can jump into the style, or pretty much the app.scss, and we can go to the right side class in here, which has like two classes. So if we are defining the right, what we do is actually take this 40% to the right in here, which means just putting it right over here with aligning item to the flex end. So any children is going to be like put it at the end of the container, so we can clearly see them in here. Remember, this one, the right side in this case, is going to have a width of 100%. So this one is actually covering up something like this, so it's quite huge, and we just need to put up the text into the end of the container in order to be able to see it and have a great user experience, of course. On the other hand, what we're going to probably do, just have the left side, and we can just take it 40%, which means we're going to be put it right over here, and the align item is going to be start, so we can have them at the start of the container instead of the end of the container, since now we have them on the left side, of course. And of course, we are applying some hover effects depending on the current side and vice versa. So this is basically how it works and how stuff is going to be working as. It's pretty basic, it's not really complicated. The only thing we need to do is actually like toggle between the is login active or not. So once we click that, once we just click the change state, remember, once we click this container, we need to toggle the state, like take this off or on, depends on that. So we're just going to use the set state to toggle between register and the login state. And for this one, I'm gonna just I need to get the previous state in order to know which state to toggle to and which state to toggle from. So here I'm gonna just put this or wrap it inside of parentheses in order to make sure it works perfectly. And for this one, I'm gonna have is log inactive, and for this log inactive, we're gonna have to do is previous state and just not is log inactive. Okay, so it's not log inactive, and just use the not operator to inverse this and toggle between both of the states. Basic enough and super easy to work with. So now it's clear seen. Once we click that, we get either this or we get the registers clear in here. If we just try to take this a little bit like this, a little bit bigger, if you click that, it goes to the right side or pretty much the left side, and you get login because we are currently inside of the register component. If you click it again, it goes into there and it pretty much shows register and so on and so forth. So make sure to put the transition right inside of your styles or the CSS file to make sure to get this smooth transition. You can enhance the transition however you want pretty much. So you can add a little bit of much more milliseconds to it or remove, but it pretty much looks pretty decent right now, and you can easily toggle between this. You can add animation to animate or smoothly animate between the changes of these two components, like between the login and the registers, or you can add a fade in and fade out animation or any opacity, some kind of cool animation or anything like that. But that's basically how it is and how the animation would look like. So hopefully I've covered all of that and just try to explain how it works. It's pretty simple. So for those of you beginners to React or just afraid of how it works, this is basically how it works. Just try to put this project together since a lot of people liked the first login format created a couple of months ago, so you basically would like that so much, and I've explained it much better than the other one. So hopefully guys, you've understand what I'm trying to do and the actual structure of this. You can completely get rid of the animation though. It's not really that much of importance or necessary, but still really interesting thing to work with. So you can grab the full source code from the GitHub repository you can find down below in the description. So thank you guys for watching. I really hope you guys have enjoyed the video tutorial. If you have any suggestions for new video tutorials like this, or you would like to put for project setups or creating small projects as if they did in here in React or any other framework, so make sure to put them down in the description or pretty much in the comments below, just as a suggestion, so we can clearly read through them and know what you guys want to. Thank you guys for watching. I've said again, make sure to share up the video. Why not put that thumbs up to know how many people likes this video, and of course comment and share. So thank you guys for watching. I've said again, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and catch you all in the next video tutorial.